here in Pam Rose's Parkside Garden, and which is something of a mini arboretum. So Pam is going to take us on a tour of her garden, and we're going to start with a snakebark tree here in the front yard.
Okay, so what I've striven to do here is to create a habitat with trees as sort of the anchor, and then build perennial beds that will flower at different times, so we have a show throughout the season. But the trees in the back you'll see are much more unusual. But I want to start with this snakebark maple, which is actually an understory maple, and that means that it does well under the big trees, and so it can do well in dappled sun and shade. And if you get a close-up,
the tree. I'm going to just try to get a large.
You can actually see the bark has a striped sort of appearance. I don't know if snakebark is actually an appropriate name because it doesn't exactly look like most of the snakes I know, but
You can see the snakebark.
yeah. And one of the things for the open gardens, which of course are every Thursday from 2 to 6 in this area, is I have signs for a lot of the trees and a lot of the more unusual things that I have, so you can read some of the background, the actual Latin name, and that sort of thing. As you enter the garden, you'll see we have a nice long curved path, and lots of different perennials live in here. There's a nice fern selection, and I try to collect different kinds of ferns. I was particularly taken with this fern, which is an ostrich plume, or this is an ostrich plume astilbe, which looks more like a fern, so I put that in with the ferns. And here we have one of our first very unusual non-native plants. This is actually a Northlight Dawn redwood, and there's a larger Dawn redwood in the back that you'll see, but this will never get more than about 4 or 5 feet tall. So this was kind of a perfect spot for it. So that's one unusual tree. Mm-hmm. And then here we have one of 3 forest pansies, and these are native to the Northeast. So-called forest pansy redbud. And redbuds are native to the Northeast, and this is called forest pansy because of the color of the leaves, particularly you can see as they emerge.
Yeah, I'm getting a close-up of them. They're beautiful.
And these are the trees that get little tiny pink flowers all along the stems in the spring. Mm-hmm. And so it's really a spectacular display. They did really well this year too. And so back here, you can't see them real well because there's a lot of foliage, but there's a variegated rose of Sharon, a taller one on the left near the pot, hanging pot, and then a smaller one on the right. And those get a pink flower, a typical rose of Sharon flower. But they're variegated, which is a little bit unusual. Mm-hmm. And as we come back through here, this particular bed has a number of different interesting trees. We have a lemonade Norway spruce, which is also a miniature, and that will never get to be more than about 4 feet. And then a little bit hidden by the sun is a bit hidden by the sedum, but this is a Korean show, a silver show Korean fir. And both of these were actually purchased at the Botanical Garden sale last year.
Oh, interesting.
So they do get some interesting things. And then you can see the other trees. This is kind of like an alpine ridge garden. That's a nice hinoki cypress, not hinoki, that's a cypress of some kind. And then we have a weeping Norway spruce, smoke bush, and what we are calling a peking lilac. We can see that when we get on the other side. But, that's a grafted lilac. We're not really sure exactly what kind it is, but Johnson's Nursery called it a peking lilac.
Okay, I'm going to get a picture of this gigantic tree here.
And that is the centerpiece of the yard. That is an umbrella magnolia.
Umbrella magnolia.
Also, interestingly and surprisingly, native to the Northeast.
Is it really?
It is, yeah. They're not that easy to find, and this tree flowers and grows every year. It's probably 4 times the size it was when we planted it, and it gets little seed pods every year that can actually be planted, and I have several friends who have propagated them. Next to it is also a dawn redwood, but the full-size version. That tree would get up to 50, 60 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
And that again is that's probably about 3 times the size it was when we planted it. So this is a very unusual specimen. This is also a variegated rose of Sharon. However, it is just starting to bud. And if you want to bring the camera in and get a close-up, you can get a preview of that gorgeous color of this little bud, which is right here. That bud will never fully open. It will open just to the point where it looks like an Impressionist painting, but it doesn't open like a regular rose of Sharon.
Because right around the bud there are the little leaves.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called. They're beautiful.
It's beautiful, and I love the way the variegation really varies.
Yeah.
Not to put a fine point on it, but here we have an almost white, cream-colored leaf, and then of course it changes, and that really has to do with the amount of light that each part of the bush gets.
I'm bringing this over just so that you can see it's not an effect of the light. It really is cream colored. It's really pretty. It's like a buttery color.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things in the yard, I think. The magnolia tree, by the way, was planted for my husband Joel, who grew up in Tennessee. Even though, I don't know if umbrella magnolias are grown in Tennessee. They probably have the more southern varieties, but he loves the big leaves and the flowers.
It's a stunning tree.
It really is. We had no idea when we planted it how wonderful it would be. These are not trees, but they're a little bit unusual. These are bear's breeches. This is a hybrid variety. There are 2 other varieties that I know of. One just has a spikier, firmer leaf, and the other one has actually a very spiky leaf with thorns. But it gets these beautiful flowers, and you can see, and it self-propagates, by the way. I have just planted some of the propagates over here.
Oh, I see them.
But when this comes up, it flowers starting at the bottom, and then it continues to grow, and each flower opens up to the top. So it's really kind of a wonderful, long, extended display.
Let me get a close-up of these guys. The flowers kind of are shaped like bells almost underneath the leaf, sort of.
This is a weeping ginkgo tree, which is not so unusual anymore. I've seen quite a few specimens for sale. But when we were designing this garden and before we had this patio installed, I walked into, again, Johnson's Nursery, and I said, I'm looking for a weeping tree, and I don't want a weeping mulberry or a weeping, what everybody else has. I want something a little unusual, but I want something that weeps naturally, not that's artificially, forced. And he said, well, I have a weeping ginkgo tree, and I'm like, okay, you can sell that to me right now. That's mine. So that was one of the first things we planted back here, and it's really quite an interesting tree. Trees that weep naturally do so because there's a coding error in the gene that when the tree puts out a new branch, it has to harden the exterior before gravity pulls it down. And there's an error in that hardening process so that the gravity pulls it down before it has a chance to do that. Kind of interesting.
Okay.
The Norway spruce, you can see the branch coming out of the top. Eventually that branch will go right to the ground and it will form a U shape and fill in, and it'll be one mass. These are unusual miniature sort of ginkgos. That's a jagged jade variety. This one is called Munchkin. And you can see that it's got that nice whitish at the leaf edge.
Oh, that's pretty.
And these won't get very tall either.
So I wanted to show this tree. So this is the forest pansy from underneath. I want you to see how the canopy is. So, because it's like you're inside of this globe. And the leaves are all heart-shaped. I don't know if you can see it very well on the screen. But it feels like an experience being underneath it. It's really beautiful.